Posiden.
I have found a couple of stories that are scary. Different events that people have been through on TikTok. I think this is perfect. I'm interested to hear what we're going to see. I've never heard any of these stories. This is going to be all new. We're both going to be listening to this for the first time together. Never looked at this. I don't know what to expect. Don't judge me if something comes up that I was surprised by. But we're going to check out a bunch of these stories. I'll probably break this down into a couple of series, a couple of different parts. This is kind of a long video, but we'll go through it, react, kind of see what we can come up with and see what's going on. But let's check out the spooky stuff.
This at night. Personal spooky story time, and we're going to call this one That Wasn't My Brother. When I was about 18 years old, I had gone out, and I had a very strict dad growing up. If you're Mexican or Hispanic, you know, my curfew was at midnight. Thankfully, my sister would cover for me, and she would hide pajamas in the restroom. That way, if I got home late, I would go straight to the restroom, I would change, and if he caught me coming home late, I was already in my pajamas, and I'd be like, what do you mean I was in the restroom? So this specific night, I get home past my curfew, I go straight to the restroom, I use the restroom, wash my face, brush my teeth, put on my pajamas. The way that our house is set up is a long hallway, restroom, my bedroom, my brother's bedroom. But as you're walking to the bedrooms, the living room is right here. So as I'm walking to my bedroom, the house is dark as hell. Our front door has glass and the porch light kind of gleams in. So I'm walking to my bedroom and I happen to look in the living room. Right in front of our front door, I see a little boy. And he's standing there. But what's crazy is the way that he's standing in this perfect spot, the light cuts off right here. So I can see from here down, but I can't see his face. His face is literally black. Like I can't see any features. I can't see nothing. I'm not exactly sure what he's wearing, but it looks like overalls or something like that. My first instinct isn't, oh my God, that's a ghost. My instinct is, what the hell is my brother doing awake right now? So I stand there and I'm calling for my brother. I'm literally like, Eric. My brother's name is Eric. So I'm whispering and I'm like, Eric. Trying to make sure that my parents don't hear me because it's about 3 a.m. and my brother is just standing there. And I'm like, Eric. Nothing. No movement. Nothing. So I'm literally standing there for what feels like forever, waiting for my brother to cut his shit out and fucking go lay down because I'm about to get my ass kicked. And he's just standing there. So now my wheels are turning and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And when I tell you this is the most I've ever been scared, like I was shook. I was shitting myself. I decide, okay, I'm going to go to my brother's room. Turn on my flashlight. I'm looking and my brother is asleep in his room. I was so scared. I didn't even go back to my room. Like I was freaking out. I've talked about my mom's house being haunted before. What's crazy is that it's inexplainable because my dad built their house. I'd understand if it was like an older house or something like that, but it was a new house. Like I have not done any research on the land, if there used to be something there, if something happened there. I have not done any research, but I have seen and heard so many things inside that house.
Yes.
It is fucking haunted. It wasn't a mimic because now that I think about it, this little boy was definitely younger than my brother, and we've seen him many times. He loves to play peekaboo. We have 2 living rooms in my parents' house, and my mom was always in the smaller living room in her recliner, and a wall separates both living rooms with a half moon, and she says that she'd be there in the morning and this is the wall and she could see the little boy like peeking. And when my mom would go and look, he'd kind of like, or if this is the wall, he'd kind of like, you know, but at least it's a friendly ghost. If you guys have any spooky stories that you'd like to share with me, please send them via DM or email, and I'd love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye.
This is 100% true story that happened to a woman in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, there was this woman named Sherry who moved into this house with her 2 children in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, she said, at the time, she didn't believe in anything supernatural. She really thought that was a bunch of nonsense. But she said, right away when they moved in, she would notice, out of the corner of her eye, sometimes shadows moving across the walls. She would hear strange noises that she couldn't explain. But she said for the most part, it was just a normal house.
Oh, that's normal, right?
One night, she's upstairs in her bedroom and she's folding laundry. She hears talking coming from her son's room. So she makes her way over to his room. The door's closed and she hears her son having a full-on conversation with someone. And she's like, who is he talking to, at 12:30 at night? So she opens the door, and when she looks in his room, he is not in his bed. So she starts yelling for him. She looks down and sees him next to the side of his bed, on his knees, crouched down with his head under the bed, talking to someone. And she's like, hey, who are you talking to? Like, who's under there? And her son's like, I can't tell you. And she said, what do you mean you can't tell me? Like, who's under the...
Hold on. My son goes ahead and tells me he can't tell me who he's talking to under the bed late at night. I'm flipping that fucking bed over.
Bed. And he's like, I can't say. He'll get mad. And she's like, what? Who's under there? So she runs over to the bed and she looks underneath there. It's empty. There's nothing under there. So she's like, you know what? Just get back in bed. Like, just stop, doing whatever you're doing. Several weeks pass, and on a regular basis, she keeps finding her son talking to someone under the bed, except there's no one there. So after a few weeks of this happening, she thinks maybe something is wrong with her son. So she takes him to this child therapist. The therapist assesses him and says, he seems completely fine. It's probably just his imagination. So several months pass and he keeps on doing this. Well, one day she's sitting down in the living room with him and they're talking when she notices he has some scratches and bruises all over his body. And she's like, where did you get those scratches and bruises from? What's going on? And he's like, I can't say, I can't tell you. And she's like, yes, you have to tell me, what is going on with you? And finally he breaks down and he starts crying and stuff. And he just starts freaking out. And then he runs up to his room. So the mom, at this time is like, I don't know what to do. What is going on with my son? She's just panicking. Later that night, she's awoken to her son screaming in his bedroom. She runs as fast as she can. She goes in his room. She finds him halfway underneath the bed. He's grabbing onto the bed frame, and it looks like something is pulling him under the bed. So she immediately grabs him, pulls him out from under the bed. She looks under there. There's no one there. So she's like, you know what? This is weird. You're sleeping with me tonight. You're going to be in bed.
There's no one under the bed after she looks under it. And there's something that's about to snatch her son up. He's got scratches and bruises all over him.
With me tonight. So they go back to her bedroom. He lays down. He falls asleep. She's sitting in bed. She can't sleep. She's freaked out about this whole situation. When all of a sudden she hears, shh, hey, come under the bed. And she's like, what? She looks over. Her son is sleeping. But then once again, she hears, hey, come here under the bed. I need to talk to you. And it's a man's voice.
Oh, fuck.
And she's like, no, who are you? Go away. And the man's like, come on, get under the bed. I need to tell you something. And she's like, no, I'm not going under the bed. And she said this man.
I'm literally like, hold on 1 second. I'll be there in a second. I'm going straight for the boom machine.
And whoever he was just started yelling obscenities and getting really angry. So she grabs her son. They get out of the house, and she said she left that night and never went back. And still to this day, that house sits there. And she said she's talked to the neighbors, and they said since she's moved, like several families have lived there and they move out.
I lied. Because this story that I'm about to tell you is the scariest story I've ever heard. If you're new here, hi. I just talk about some pretty scary stuff, and recently I opened an email where anyone who finds this page would be able to submit their ghost stories. And let me tell you, not only have I been getting an abundance of stories that I have loved reading that are from every corner of the earth, these are actually scary. And what I mean by actually scary is exactly that. They actually freak me out. On my last video, I said this was the scariest story that I've ever heard. This one. So I just heard scratching, and as you can see, it's still day out, and that's the only time I really film these videos is during the day because I'm a scaredy cat. So I don't know what that's about, because I thought it was my boyfriend pranking me. So I looked outside and there's no one there. Only when I did the intro for this person. So I'm going to redo it, and if it happens again, I hope it's on video. So anyways, this story comes from Dakota, who opens the email like this. This is the story about a who disguised itself as a little girl and haunted me for 2 years. Dakota then gives us some background context and says that she's a medium. She has seen, felt, heard, and touched spirits since she was around 5 years old, which in retrospect is really scary when you think about it. As she says, it all started when she was staying at her mom's house 2 hours away. She had a friend who lived right in front of the woods, and they decided to play hide and go seek. So Dakota finds a great hiding spot in between a shed and a chain link fence. And she says she was hiding, looks over to her right, and on the other side of the fence is a little girl staring at her. And as soon as her and this little girl made eye contact, the little girl reached through the chain link fence and grabbed her wrist. Dakota yanks her hand back and looks back at this little girl, and she is not there anymore. It is also to be noted that this was around fall time, so there were leaves on the ground and branches and twigs and etc. And she didn't hear anyone walk away or run. So Dakota runs out, tries to tell her friend what had happened, and her friend is just not having it because she's scared. Fast forward 2 months, and she's back at her dad's house and having a sleepover with an old friend. As Dakota and her friend are talking to each other on her bed, she looks over at the doorway, and the little girl is standing right in the doorway. She didn't really think anything about it because at the time, all the neighbor kids were allowed to just kind of walk in her house. And I know families like that, so I understand. But she did a double take, and the little girl was gone the next time she looked. She asked her friend, "Did you see someone?" And her friend said, "No, I didn't see anyone." And Dakota said, "Little did I know this was the beginning of a 2-year ordeal."
Jeez.
Dakota says every day since then, she sees this little girl in her house. And this little girl did not talk. She just stared at Dakota a lot of the time. And sometimes she would only show half of her face from around the corner. And I'm going to quote this. But her favorite thing to do was watch me sleep. Dakota includes in her email that she likes sleeping in complete darkness. And the only thing that is radiating light in her room is her alarm clock that is blue. And she says every single night she would wake up and see this little girl standing in the doorway, watching her sleep. Dakota says that the most active this little girl was when she was home alone, cleaning her room. And Dakota, while cleaning her room, looks over into the living room. And just for some context, she lives in a trailer, so it's completely open concept, so you can look through rooms. She looks into the living room and sees a little girl standing there watching her. As soon as they make eye contact, the little girl runs into the kitchen. So Dakota follows her. And once she goes into the kitchen, the little girl standing in front of the fridge. The moment they make eye contact, the little girl runs into her dad's room. So she goes into her dad's room. Nobody's there. She's looking around. Nothing. Hears a loud bang coming from the laundry room. goes into the laundry room, sees the little girl standing in front of the washer and dryer. Then she runs back into the kitchen, and Dakota didn't see her the rest of the day. And Dakota says that it was really common for this little girl to not speak ever, but she would want Dakota's attention, so she would run around and kick things and knock things off counters and slam cabinets, etc. But fast forward 2 years, and Dakota's obviously used to it by now, but she hasn't seen this little girl in 4 months.
Bro, I'm gonna be real with you. I think all this little girl wanted to do was just wash her clothes. But we're gonna continue the video.
Until one day, she saw her in her dream, and it was Dakota's first lucid dream. Dakota says that she goes to sleep, wakes up, and everything in her dream feels so real. She turns over at the clock, and it reads 3:16. When Dakota turns her head back around, there the little girl is, and she looks normal little girl that she's seen for the past 2 years at this point. And all of a sudden, this little girl starts to look really mangled and disgusting. She starts developing this smile and these teeth and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls back in her bed and wakes up. Looks over at the clock, 3:16. Dakota gets up, goes to the bathroom, and as she's standing up from using the bathroom, the little girl is standing in the doorway. She looked like the same little girl that she's seen the past 2 years, until again, she looked really mangled and disgusting and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls backwards screaming. And they had this animal cage in their bathtub at the time that they were cleaning, falls back on that, and she could feel the cage under her. But nonetheless, she wakes up again. And it is again 3:16 a.m. But at this point, Dakota is too scared to move and too scared to do anything, so she just sits there until the sun comes up, where she feels safe. Dakota then, that morning, started to feel this burning sensation on her back, goes and looks in the mirror, and there's a huge gash on her back from where she fell
On the cage.
onto something. Her then best friend comes over later that day and also has spiritual connections, and tells her about this dream that she had where she was watching in third person and verbatim describes the dream that Dakota had twice. And at this point in time, Dakota did not tell her what was going on. Dakota then ends her email by telling us that if you see a clock or a phone in your dream, it means you're not really dreaming. And as corny as it sounds, she really and truly believes that this little girl was disguised as trying to get her when she was in her most vulnerable state, sleeping. But that experience was 5 years ago, and she hasn't seen that little girl since. And this is all I'm going to say. I don't know how people deal with that stuff for years. I dealt with it for a month, and no. That story was really long. However, I think it was the best story I've read so far. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for my ghost stories.
Hold on. Whoa. Yo, what's up, Maya? Hold on. So, 3:16, I've heard about 3:16. There's something going that's related to that time. I haven't really looked much into it. I know it's something spiritual about that. It's been involved in a different couple of horror movies I've heard about over the years. That sounds like that girl had an intense, serious situation with sleepwalking. When the friend came over that had a spiritual connection and said that she described the same event from a third person view of everything she went through. I can't even explain that.
Tell me a scary story. I'll go first. For starters, I live in the Appalachian Mountains. Our dogs used to run off all the time. One day, me and my younger cousin got off of the bus and we noticed that the dogs were nowhere to be found. We lived surrounded completely by forest. Them not being there wasn't unusual, so we decided just to go off and look for them in the woods, which is something we did pretty often, so we weren't scared. Me and my cousin started walking through the woods, calling for the dogs, and I had the stupid idea to start whistling. We heard what sounded like our dog barking coming from deeper in the woods, so we started walking towards the sound. But the deeper we were walking in the woods towards the sound, I started getting this really bad feeling in my gut that we needed to turn around. I told my cousin how I was feeling, and he told me that he was sure that that was our dogs barking. We decided to keep walking, and then we heard a whistle coming from the direction that the dog's barking was coming from. When I was whistling, I wasn't doing like a normal whistle, I was doing this weird whistle, and this sounded just like the weird whistle I had just done. Almost like whatever it was copying me. We stopped walking and we heard more barking, and I just knew that it wasn't our dogs barking. Like, it did sound similar, but it just wasn't the same. That's when my little cousin looked at me scared like he was about to say something, and I told him just ignore it. I grabbed his hand and we started to calmly walk back home. I didn't say anything, but the entire time we were walking, it sounded like something was walking back behind us. We kept making the walk back home. It took us another like 15 minutes to make it. When we finally did make it back home, we were trying to convince ourselves that it had actually just been our dogs. About 5 minutes later, our older cousin showed up and we told her what had happened, and she said that we still needed to go find the dogs. So she grabbed her dog who can track their scents, and we headed back into the woods. We started calling their names like we had done before, and I started to whistle. My older cousin stopped me and pointed at her dog, who was sitting on the ground growling, looking up at the top of the trees. I grabbed my younger cousin and said we should leave. My older cousin told us no, the dogs could be hurt, so we needed to keep looking for them. After a little convincing, we started walking deeper, but not in the direction that the dog was growling at, just like in the opposite direction. We were walking maybe for 5 or 6 more minutes when we heard what sounded like my mom calling for us, saying she had found the dogs. My mom was in Texas at the time, and she wouldn't be home for 2 more days. We decided to leave. We went the long way, so we weren't walking towards like where the voice came from. When we got home, my younger cousin was crying, asking what if the dogs were hurt, because we just still hadn't found the dogs. Right about that time, our neighbor came walking up the driveway with our dogs. He said they'd been in his house the entire time. He had found them and brought them into his house because the game warden was there. He didn't want them to be taken, so he waited until the game warden left, and then he brought them home to us. The next day, my uncle was asking us about it. When we told him what happened, he looked so scared and said that the game warden was there because one of the neighbors had called in and reported seeing a weird, demented, sick-looking, huge black dog in the forest by our house. They also reported hearing the creepy whistling and barks. The story was actually DM'd to me by a follower. In honor of spooky season, I'm going to be reading a lot more of the stories that y'all send to me on here, so be sure to send them to my DM.
Never let a man come over to your house after a first date. And if you used to do that, you're not going to do that after the story time. Let's go. I also forget to mention that it's a true story time. Yeah, let us begin. The story starts off with this young girl. She goes on a first date with this guy. They go out to get dinner. And honestly, he was a green flag all throughout. Like, he was nice to the waitresses. He paid for the bill. Like, no red flags at all. This is why no matter how normal or nice a guy seems to be, you can never trust them too quickly because the story's like this. The dinner goes great, he pays the bill, and then they just go about their day and they go to their own homes. So obviously this is a respectful man, right? Like, he didn't even try to get her to come over and didn't ask to go over to her house yet. So she goes home and then she gets a call from him, and he's basically saying how he can't find his key, his roommate is not answering the phone, and if he could just come over for the time being until either his roommate answers the phone or he finds his key somehow. And she obviously said yes because, once again, no red flags. He comes over, they're having a blast, they're just sitting on the couch, talking, vibing, and then it just gets really late, so she's like, hey, you can sleep on the couch until you figure things out, I'm gonna go to my room. And something told her to lock the door. Obviously, she lives alone, she doesn't normally lock the door, but something, an instinct. A woman's instinct is always right.
We don't lock the door when you live alone. So she ends up locking
the door and then just going to sleep. A couple hours pass, and then she gets a knock on her bedroom door, and it's him asking for a phone charger because his died. Something told her, once again, don't open the door, just tell him where it is. So she does not move, and she says, it's on the kitchen counter, help yourself. And he says thank you, and then he goes about his business, and then she just goes back to bed. Okay, this is where it gets a little for me. A couple minutes go by, and then he comes back and knocks on the door and says, hey, this charger's not working. Do you have a charger in your room that I can borrow? What? Something just raises a flag in her head, hey, something's wrong. Why does he want to get into my room so bad? So she calls the police. After she calls the police, she hears the door kind of opening. She hears a bunch of commotion outside. And then a couple minutes later, the police knock on her bedroom door and say, hey, you're safe. He's in custody. Come outside and look at your living room. Guess what she saw? Please, just pause the video. I want you guys to guess first before you actually hear what it is. So she walked.
What do y'all think she saw? Man, she walked out in the living room. It was just dookie all. No, I'm kidding. Let's see what it was.
Walks out from her bedroom to her living room with the police, and she sees her whole living room fully plastered, and she just sees a box of power tools. So drills, axes, you name it, it was in that power tool box. If she left her room and she didn't use her womanly instincts, you guys, women, we're never wrong. I said what I said and I meant it. If she did not just listen to her instincts, she would have been gone. I'm so scared for women. Like, we're not safe ever. And it's really sad. I really want to know how she felt in that moment. Like, just to be like, whoa. Like, I just listened to my gut. And that's the main reason I'm still alive till this day. Like, if you're watching this, I'm so proud of you. And I hope you know that. Moral of the story is a man can be so normal, have the perfect job, and just be a walking green flag and still not be the person that you think he is. So just don't let anyone into your home. Make sure that you guys run a background check first. Okay, I love you guys. Bye.
My experiences in hotels, and this is coming from Alexander DeVille here on TikTok. By the way, thank you so much for letting me share this with everybody. This is the time to sit back, relax, maybe go grab a snack, because this is a long story, but it is so good. Hey Letty, I wanted to share some of my experiences since Halloween is around the corner. I've had some unusual experiences whenever I stay in hotels while traveling. Strange things always seem to happen, and I'm usually the only one who wakes up and hears things while everyone else is fast asleep. I encountered ghosts and communicated with some of them growing up. However, throughout the years, I started to suppress my spiritual side. As I got older, I've reconnected with my spirituality and intuition, but still keep my distance from spirits. I often joke with my friends that I'm probably the only one who gets woken up by strange noises in hotels because I am more open to the spiritual side than they are. I think it's because I'm in a familiar and controlled environment at home, but it's not my space in a hotel, so I am more vulnerable to these occurrences. My friends and I traveled to Denver, Colorado for a concert. It was 3 of my friends, and one of them brought their younger brother, whom we all call Steve for his privacy, who is a few years younger than us. All 4 of us slept in the bedroom while Steve stayed in the living room on the couch. I remember hearing banging on the door in the middle of the night. I assumed it was Steve, who needed to use the restroom, which was in the bedroom. Despite the loud noise, none of my friends in the room seemed to have woken up. Feeling tired, I assumed Steve would figure out that he just needed to slide the door open, so I didn't bother getting up to open the door and fell back to sleep. The next day, I asked Steve why he had been banging on the door if all he had to do was slide it open. He looked confused and denied ever waking up during the night. Everyone was a little unnerved, so I changed the subject to prevent them from getting scared. Later that day, they received the news that their uncle had passed away the night before. We couldn't help but wonder if it was their uncle who had been banging on the door the previous night. This other time, we went out of town and had to stay in a hotel. But before I continue my story, I want to mention that I have been a devotee of La Santa Muerte for 2 years here on Dia de los Muertos. Steve asked me about La Santa Muerte and said he had heard she was bad. I explained that the Santa Muerte is not inherently bad. It depends on the intention of the person seeking her help. Some people may misuse her power for negative purposes, while others use it for good. In general, she cares for and protects her devotees. She is not for everyone, but she deserves respect because we will all see her when the day comes. I also mentioned that I always light a candle and pray to her for our safety when traveling. After our conversation, we called it a night and went to bed. It was the next day we checked out of the hotel and started driving back home. On our way, Steve told us that he had seen a dark shadow sitting next to my feet on my side of the bed. He mentioned that he blinked several times to make sure he was seeing right. And indeed, he saw a figure sitting right next to me while I was sleeping. He said he couldn't see its face because it was facing away from where he was, but he got scared and covered his face with the blanket. Despite him feeling frightened, he told himself, "No, Steve, you have to see what it is." So he got the courage to uncover his face, but there was nothing there anymore, and then later went back to sleep. While he was finishing his story, I looked at him through the rearview mirror and asked, "Was she wearing a cloak?" He said yes. I smiled and said, "Who you saw was La Santa Muerte." He looked at me with shock and fear, but I told him not to be scared. She was just watching over me while I slept. This is why she was beside me, next to my feet, like a mother watching over her sleeping child. Mi santita siempre me cuida. Knowing that she was watching over me while I slept warms my heart. The next time we went out of town, Steve didn't want to go anymore. He said it wasn't because of what he had seen, but I low-key think that's why. But then again, I don't blame him. It would be expected for anyone to be afraid, especially because we're all taught to fear death. In our next trip, there was only 4 of us and Steve didn't want to go. Let's call them Jenny, Eva, and Sam for their privacy. That day, we went to a mystical store where they sell crystals and images. In the store, there was a section of statues of duendes. I automatically did not make eye contact with them and did not make any negative comments on how they looked because I knew you should never disrespect a duende and their appearance. As I walked around the store, something kept calling me back to where they were, and I was tempted to buy one and have it for my protection in my home. But in the end, I decided not to buy it because it is a lot of responsibility to have one in your home, and they are known for being pranksters and getting jealous of pets, and I would not do that to my poodle, so I left it as is. Jenny, Sam, and Eva brought protection necklaces. After leaving the shop, we went to a different store. As we walked, Jenny's purse was unclipped from the straps and fell off her shoulder. Her protection necklace fell out of her purse. I jokingly told her that the evil spirits didn't want her to have that necklace. We all laughed and her purse kept falling off. I would understand if the clips to the straps were loose or broken, but the clips were perfectly fine. We went to Chick-fil-A and I was standing behind her in line when it happened again. She was about to reach into her purse to get her wallet. I saw it unclip this time before Jenny reached over to her purse. Even the clerk saw it and looked at Jenny weirdly, so Jenny finally got tired of it falling and decided to carry it instead. After we finished eating, we went back to the hotel. I brought up the topic of duendes and told them that I hope none of them had said anything negative about the duendes at the store. Jenny looked nervous and said yes. I thought to myself that they were weird, ugly looking. I told her, no Jenny, you should never make negative comments about them or they might get upset with you. Nothing happened after that. I wonder if the duendes were unclipping her purse. It was night and we were getting ready to go to bed. There were two queen beds. Jenny and Eva slept in one while Sam and I slept in the other. Eva was teasing Jenny, telling her she better not snore because last time she couldn't get sleep because of her. Not to throw shade at Jenny, but she does snore pretty loud. I told her we could have a snoring competition and see who snores the loudest, and we laughed about it and went to sleep. It was around 6 a.m. and the sun had not yet risen. I could hear faint talking, although it wasn't loud, but in a lower tone. I thought to myself, why are Jenny and Eva having a whole conversation this early in the morning? I was so tired because we had gone to sleep late that night. I tried to ignore them. I ignored what they were saying, but I realized there was snoring and only one person talking. Then I started to sound repetitive, and I thought, wait, that kind of sounds like a spell or a ritual or something. Who the fuck is casting a spell right now and on who? So
shit was like, Jenny.
I kept my eyes closed and focused on what was being said. That's when I realized the small voice was saying, "Accept your eyes," in a rhythm with Jenny snoring, so I figured Ava was probably talking in her sleep. Jenny kept snoring and the little voice kept saying, "Accept your eyes." I really had to go pee, so I got up to go to the restroom and also to see who was talking. When I got in front of the bed, I realized Eva was not moving her mouth. I looked to see if there was anything in between that could be making that noise, but there was nothing. That's when I realized it was coming out of Jenny, even though she was snoring loudly. Oh, I got chills. Wait. I told myself it was way too early for the paranormal shit, and I really needed to pee. So I went to the restroom and did my business while listening to the voice, and the voice stopped as soon as I flushed the toilet. Then I came out and everything was the same, except there was no longer a small female voice saying, "Accept your eyes." I decided to go back to sleep and tell them about it in the morning. In the morning, I told them what I had heard, and Jenny was in denial. I told her, "Jenny, I wouldn't make this up," but I think she was scared to accept that the voice was coming out of her. She even said that sometimes people mumble when they snore, but I told her, "No, Jenny, this was a completely clear voice saying, 'Accept your eyes.' While you snore, there is no way you can do both at the same time." Then I remembered that I have an app that records my sleeping patterns and sometimes records noises while I sleep. The recording is not as clear as it was in person, but in person it was crystal clear on what was being said. I will see if I can somehow submit the audio to you. I am not good with editing audio, but I tried to reduce Jenny's snoring so that you can hear the small voice saying, "Accept your eyes." I did ask Jenny for her permission to submit the audio, and I do have the audio. We will continue to travel together and occasionally see or hear things, but I just keep it to myself, and if they hear something, I try to make an excuse up so they don't get frightened. My friends believe the message was intended for me, encouraging me to embrace my third eye as I no longer communicate with the spirit realm, as I did when I was younger. Out of the four of us, I was the only one who heard the voice. I think the message was more for Jenny to accept what she sees when encountering a duende and to never disrespect a duende. But who do you think the message was for? Personally, I feel like the message was for him because he heard it. If he hadn't told anybody, they wouldn't have even known. But then again, I can see the other side too. So what do you guys think? The audio is 5 minutes long. I don't know if I'm gonna cut it down shorter when I'm editing or not, but without further ado, here is the audio for you. Am I rhyming? Oh my god, I'm a rapper. You're not a rapper, you dumb bitch. Here's the audio. So, after hearing the audio, what do you think? Did you hear it? Who do you think that message was for? Please leave.
Have you ever heard somebody say?
Yeah. All right. That's part one of the TikTok horror stories.